They seemed so confident, so in control. You opened up, leaned in, gave your best, and then came the distance. The silence. The sudden shift from closeness to coldness. And you were left wondering, did I do something wrong? Or worse, why am I always the one holding the emotional weight? If this sounds familiar, you're not imagining it. I'm Jim Rohn, and in this video, I'm going to show you the one psychological truth about avoidant personalities that changes everything and why, when you truly understand it, the avoidant dynamic always starts to crack. Because here's what most people get wrong. Avoidants don't pull away because they don't care. They pull away because you caring feels unsafe. Emotional closeness triggers their oldest survival reflexes. They're not rejecting you, they're retreating from vulnerability. But here's the twist: avoidant behavior only thrives when you try to fix it, chase it, or make sense of it. When you stop doing that, the whole power dynamic shifts. They start to feel the space they've created, and often they start to crumble under it. In this video, I'm going to walk you through why avoidants seem emotionally detached, how their silence is not about you, and most importantly, how to respond with grounded clarity that protects your peace and reclaims your power. If you've ever felt stuck in an anxious avoidant loop, giving too much, waiting too long, and doubting your worth because someone else won't meet you emotionally, this is the clarity you've been needing. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for updates, and leave a comment to share your story. Because when you stop chasing confusion and start holding boundaries with calm confidence, everything changes. Let's get into it. Let's start with one of the most misunderstood truths about avoidant personalities. They don't thrive on closeness, they thrive on your confusion. That may sound harsh, but it's not meant to demonize them. It's meant to help you see the pattern clearly so you can stop being caught in it. Avoidants often appear calm, detached, and in control. They may even seem emotionally mature at first, measured in their responses, not easily rattled. But this outward calm is rarely real security. It's usually a defense mechanism. It's emotional distance dressed up as strength. And it works not because they're manipulative, but because you keep trying to decode the distance. You try to fix the emotional gap, prove your worth, soften your needs, or show them you're safe to love. All that effort, it's the fuel that keeps the avoidant dynamic alive. They tend to give you just enough a flirty message here, a warm night together, a vulnerable moment that's gone the next day. It's never zero. And that's the point. Because that tiny breadcrumb of connection keeps you chasing, waiting, wondering what's real and what's not. You begin to doubt yourself. You ask, am I asking for too much? Or maybe I just need to be more patient. And now you're stuck not because of how much you care, but because you're being starved emotionally while still hoping to be fed. I worked with a woman named Leah who was dating an avoidant man for almost a year. He would disappear emotionally during conflict, only to reappear casually as if nothing happened. She'd be left spiraling, blaming herself, trying harder to bring him back. When she stopped chasing, when she simply observed the pattern and chose to no longer respond with effort, everything shifted. He messaged her within days, confused by her calm. He was used to holding the power in the dynamic, and without her emotional labor, his illusion of control began to crack. That's the thing. Avoidants often don't crumble when you confront them, they crumble when you stop feeding their avoidance with your reaction. You don't need to get louder or explain more. You need to get quieter internally. Less frantic. More clear, not cold but calm. That kind of energy says, I see your pattern. I'm not mad, I'm not chasing. But I'm also not staying where I'm constantly uncertain. This shift isn't about punishment. It's about protecting your peace. Because once you step out of the confusion, you begin to see how much you were carrying emotionally just to keep the connection alive. And once you stop playing that game, their power over you fades. Not because they changed, but because you did. Here's something most people don't realize until they're exhausted. An avoidant silence isn't about you. It's not payback. It's not emotional cruelty. It's a protective reflex, one they probably developed long before they even met you. Their silence is how they regulate what feels to them like emotional chaos. It's not punishment. It's a retreat into control. Avoidantly attached people often grew up in environments where emotional closeness was inconsistent, unsafe, or simply unavailable. Vulnerability was met with judgment, dismissal, or rejection. So what did they learn? I don't need too much. Don't get too close. Don't rely on anyone. And that conditioning doesn't go away just because they like you. In fact, the more they care, the more threatening emotional exposure can feel. That's why when things start getting real, when connection deepens or you express normal needs, they often pull back. They go silent, become vague, or shift the energy. And if you don't know what's really happening, you'll take it personally. You'll spiral into self-doubt, replay conversations in your head, and assume you messed up. You'll ask, what did I do wrong? But here's the turning point when you stop asking that and start asking something way more powerful. Why am I accepting so little? Because that question puts the focus back where it belongs, on your worth, on your emotional needs, on your right to clarity, consistency, and real connection. When you begin to see their withdrawal as fear, not rejection, you stop internalizing it. And when you stop reacting to it, something amazing happens. The cycle starts to lose its grip on you. You begin to detach, not in bitterness, but in clarity. And that's where the power shift happens. Let me tell you about Marcus, a client I worked with who was stuck in a loop with his avoidant ex. She would disappear for days whenever he expressed a need or tried to talk about the relationship. He kept thinking if he just worded things better, stayed calm, or gave her time, she'd eventually come around. But she never really did. She just became more confident that he'd always be there. Eventually, Marcus reached a breaking point, not in anger, but in truth. He stopped explaining, stopped chasing, and let her feel the space she created. What happened next? She came back, of course she did. But Marcus was no longer interested in managing someone else's emotional discomfort at the cost of his own. He didn't cut her off or punish her. He simply said, "This doesn't work for me anymore." And he meant it. And that's the moment the avoidant dynamic begins to unravel, when you stop participating in it. When you stop feeding it with self-doubt, overfunctioning, or emotional overinvestment. Because avoidant behavior doesn't stand up well to boundaries. It relies on you shrinking, chasing, or waiting. And when you no longer do that, their fear doesn't know where to go. So no, you don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to perform to be loved. You don't have to prove that you're easy enough to stay. You just have to know yourself well enough to say, "I love you, but I won't abandon myself to hold this together." That clarity is what disarms avoidant defenses, not force, not fixing. Just calm, clear energy that no longer matches their chaos. That's when the cycle ends. That's when you reclaim your peace. And that's when the avoidant starts to see not what they lost, but what they could never control. This is where everything changes, not in some dramatic breakup or huge confrontation, but in a quiet, grounded choice. You stop reacting and you start detaching. Not with bitterness, not with mind games, but with emotional maturity. You stop rewarding inconsistency with more effort. You stop feeding the dynamic that's kept you stuck in confusion. And in that moment, the avoidant no longer holds the same emotional power over you. Let's be clear, detachment is not coldness. It's not shutting down. It's not pretending you don't care. It's you saying, "I care deeply, but I will not abandon myself to keep this going." Detachment means your self-worth no longer rises and falls with their availability. You're no longer stuck trying to decode every text, read into every silence, or fix every emotional distance. You let the pattern speak for itself and you listen. When you do that, you move from reaction to response. Instead of panicking when they pull back, you observe. You give it space. You check in with yourself before reaching out. You ask, what feels grounded for me here? Not how do I get them to come back? And that subtle shift changes everything. Avoidants expect you to chase. They're used to the dynamic where they pull away and you close the gap. So when you don't when you simply hold your energy, honor your standards, and stop pushing for connection, they start to feel it. The silence they once relied on to keep you at bay suddenly feels different. They no longer feel in control. Not because you've taken power from them, but because you stopped giving it away. I worked with a man named Chris, who had been in a cycle with an avoidant woman for over a year. Every time they'd get close, she'd pull away saying she needed space, wasn't ready, felt overwhelmed. And every time, Chris would try harder, more texts, more reassurance, more effort. Until one day he stopped. Not angrily, not with resentment. He simply told her, "I care about you, but this emotional inconsistency doesn't work for me anymore. I need peace." And he meant it. She didn't respond for days. Then she started checking his stories, sending hey texts, reaching out again. But by then, Chris had already stepped out of the dynamic. He wasn't trying to win anymore. He had already won by returning to himself. That's the power of emotional detachment. Not to get someone back, but to get you back. When you stop rewarding hot and cold behavior with more investment, you teach both them and yourself what you're truly available for. You stop playing the game, and that's the moment they realize you're not holding the door open anymore. And ironically, that's often the moment they finally feel the urge to walk through it. Avoidants are used to a very predictable pattern. They distance and you come closer. They withdraw, and you try harder. Over time, this dynamic becomes familiar, and even though it's painful for both people, it offers the avoidant a sense of control. They're not the ones risking vulnerability, you are. They're not the ones holding emotional space, you are. And without even realizing it, you end up doing all the emotional labor to keep the relationship afloat. But the moment you stop doing that, the moment you stop rushing to fix the tension, explain your worth, or hold the connection together, you shift the entire dynamic. Avoidants don't know what to do when their silence is met with stillness. They expect pursuit. So when they don't get it, when your response is clarity instead of chaos, their mask starts to crack. And it's not because you confront them with drama. It's because your consistency highlights their inconsistency. You say what you mean. You show up when you say you will. You communicate with calm, and you stop entertaining mixed signals. And suddenly, their behavior, once easy to mask, becomes visible by contrast. The avoidant has to face their own discomfort, not yours. I once worked with a woman named Brianna. She'd always been the glue in her relationships, especially with her emotionally unavailable ex. But when she started holding simple boundaries, like not responding to vague messages, not continuing conversations that went nowhere, and walking away from breadcrumbs with grace, his indifference started to slip. He became unsure. He even admitted, "You're different now. I don't know what you're thinking anymore." And that was the point. She wasn't reacting, she was responding. She wasn't chasing, she was choosing herself. That's what boundaries do. They're not walls. They're clarity. And to someone who's always relied on avoidance to stay in control, clarity is disarming. It demands emotional growth without saying a word. And that's when the avoidant either steps up or steps away. Either way, you win. Because you stopped playing the role they depended on and started becoming the version of yourself who doesn't need to chase love to be loved. Here's the truth that will set you free. Your boundaries are not about them, they're about you. You're not drawing lines to punish, control, or manipulate the avoidant. You're drawing lines to protect your peace, to honor your time, to affirm that your emotional needs are valid and deserve to be met with consistency, not confusion. Avoidant dynamics thrive in the gray area where nothing is defined, where feelings are unclear, and where accountability can be avoided. So when you say, "I'm not available for emotional ambiguity anymore," it's like flipping on a light in a room that was comfortable in the dark. You're not being demanding, you're just being honest. And that honesty does something powerful, it disrupts the pattern. When you hold your boundaries, when you stop tolerating half connection, breadcrumb affection, or inconsistent intimacy, the avoidant has only two choices. They can step up, or they can step away. And either outcome is okay, because you're not chasing anymore. You're not waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. I've seen this happen so many times. A client lets go of the emotional caretaking, stops trying to explain themselves into being loved, and starts showing up with calm clarity. The avoidant partner might panic, they might reach out, or they might not. But either way, she wins, because she's no longer in limbo. She's in alignment with her values, her worth, and her peace. And that's what this is really about, your clarity being stronger than their avoidance. Not louder, just stronger. Because real strength doesn't need to beg, chase, or plead. It just holds the line and says, "This is what love feels like to me. If you can't meet me here, I'll meet myself somewhere better." Let's bring this home with the clarity you deserve. Avoidants don't crumble because you yell, chase, or try harder. They crumble when you stop doing the emotional work for them. When you stop trying to decode their silence. When you recognize that their avoidance is rooted in fear and that you don't have to keep yourself small or confused just to stay connected. In this video, we broke down the emotional truth behind avoidant behavior. We talked about how their silence is a survival strategy, not a reflection of your worth. We explored how calm detachment, clear boundaries, and emotional self-respect disarm the very patterns that keep avoidant dynamics alive. You learned how to stop rewarding inconsistency with over-effort, how to shift from reaction to grounded response, and how to stand firmly in your values without begging to be seen. Because here's the truth, you don't have to convince someone to choose you. You just have to choose yourself deeply, consistently, and without apology. And from that place, you'll attract either a better version of them or someone far more aligned with the secure connection you actually deserve. If this video brought you clarity, validation, or even just a deep exhale, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you never miss another message, and drop a comment below. Tell me what resonated most for you today. What pattern are you finally ready to stop participating in? Thank you for watching. for showing up for yourself, and for doing the work most people avoid. Remember, real love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself, it invites you to come home to yourself first. Until next time, stay grounded, stay clear, and stay true to your peace.